And we're live. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode or session of Lit Author Lives with Vuvu Veda. Today, we are joined by Alice Takawira, all the way from Georgia in the USA, and she is the author of debut novel Turning Tables. And this is quite an interesting story, and I cannot wait to engage you on this particular story. I'll just give you a chance to say hi and just let us know a little bit more about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alice Takawira, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I am from Zimbabwe and now an American, but originally from Zimbabwe. Turning Tables is my debut novel, which I am super proud of. I've been wanting to write for years, and I'm just glad I finally did it. And I'm happy for you to read it. Give me all your feedback, good, bad, whatever. I just love that it's out there in the universe and people can actually share. I can share my work with people. So just happy to be here.
And I'm so grateful that you are saying that, being on the other side of literature where you read, you review, you give your opinion. Sometimes you don't know if you're stepping on people's toes by giving your honest opinion, but I really do believe in positive feedback or criticism, in that sense, that at least for me, my favorite thing to do is, if an author's got more than one book, is to watch the progression, right? Because I feel like once you've done the one, I think the one is the biggest angst of all. I think you have no choice but to improve. So I'm very glad to hear that you are open to all forms of criticism. And sometimes also it's a taste thing, right? I
Yep.
might not be into what you are into. It's not that your story is bad,
Yep.
but it's just that it's probably not my cup of tea. So I hope that you balance those well in terms of how the criticism flows. But I'm so glad you finally like dove into the deep end and did something that you wanted to do for a while. That's
Hey,
great.
so I also have a book club online that I started a couple of years ago, Verenga Girls Book
Yes.
Club. And we read a book every month. And I've been an avid reader all my life. As a kid, I
Oh,
was
I love it.
in libraries. I was that girl who always had a book under my pillow. That's where I kept my books. You read
Oh,
my
lovely.
Yeah, so I criticize books. I criticize the writing style, the stories and stuff. So I understand that criticizing it isn't always a bad thing. It's a taste thing.
Mm,
So
mm,
it was very hard for me to actually put my book out. I was so nervous.
I can imagine.
What if it just falls flat? You have all of those things, but we found out
Mm,
that it's not going to be for everyone. Some people don't like romance at all. Some people,
mm, mm,
and I'm happy to grow and learn from the feedback.
mm,
So
mm,
learning to
mm. That's great, man. That's great. And you can't write for everyone, right? What did is it Toni Morrison who said that you must write the book that you would want to read? You really cannot write for every single person. And if you've written that book to your satisfaction, then you've done the act. And like I'm saying, I think it's kind of like anybody who's in academia as well. I think getting the project out there, right, is the biggest hurdle. And as soon as you can do that, then you can come back to yourself. You probably also criticize yourself when you're reading it, right? You're probably thinking, oh, I should have done this better. I should have done that better. I should have changed this. I should have changed that. But at least you did it, right? That didn't hold you back. That didn't keep
yeah,
you from actually delivering the work.
yeah, yeah, true.
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're just going to jump into our conversation. We'll wait for everybody else who might be joining us to join us, and we'll chat towards the end of our conversation. Right. So now that we know that this is your debut novel, Alice, it is often said that an author's debut has a dose of autobiographical content in it. Having read out the about the author a section and reading the main female character, who's Maita, it seems on the surface that there are numerous similarities between the two of you, besides the obvious ones, right? What are there any other further similarities between you and her?
Yes, well, true. That is always the number one question. I've had a couple of book tours and book events around the country, and and that's always number one question: where does fiction begin and where does it end, right? Uh,
Yes.
so, so yes, Maita is very much like me. She's from Zimbabwe, came to America. She's a physical therapist, went to London, all of that good stuff. A lot of the things that she thinks are very similar to my thoughts on things. So I found like
Okay.
a way of me expressing some of my own personal views on certain things, just like relationships. So I talk a lot about different types of relationships, platonic relationships, romantic relationships, relationships, and multicultural relationships. Pretty much some of my own views on how things are perceived as an immigrant, especially having London and lived here in America. I just sort of saw so many different things that we all go through, and they're not unique to me as a Zimbabwean. When I speak to Nigerians who've also made that of leaving your home country and starting in a new country, I realized that we all have common problems, triumphs, challenges, and relationships is one of the main ones. Like how to struggle, trying to fit into this new country, right? Get your job and maintain a social life with people who don't always like you, don't always think like you. So a lot of what is in the book is some of it is some of my own views. Like this is what I think problem with certain relationships, and I kind of use the stories to spin that around. And I used my experiences to inform the character because I wanted it to be as authentic as possible. I wanted it to be something that if someone picked it up, they can say, oh, you know what, I've actually been through this. So I use some of the things that I've been through to inform her experiences and knowing that these things actually do happen and can happen. So, yeah.
And you know what? I think that it adds to making a strong character, right? I believe in the whole notion of writing what you know. This is who you are, this is what you've experienced, and you're telling a story that is not outside of your general experience, right? If you were writing maybe a fantasy, maybe you'd put less of yourself in it as compared to a literary fiction type of work, right? And I think that when you write what you know, you write with more confidence, right? It's more believable. People can believe the character that you have created. And I felt like that about Maita. I felt like she was very, actually all of your characters, I felt like to some degree, I felt like it's fiction. They're too realistic. I felt like, okay, like listen, I get it, okay, but still, like it's fiction. Can they have less vices and be just a little bit more perfect? But I get you, and it's quite powerful to be able to surrender that part of yourself into the creativity process, right? Because, like I'm saying, as a reader, I'm thinking, obviously, if I'd ever write anything, I'd probably make sure that none of it has anything to do with reality, because I feel like reality is harder to tell than fiction, right? So I'm glad that you put those parts of yourself in the story.
Yes, it was very hard to also just pour a little bit, because I did date my race. I've dated a white British guy, and I have dated a Nigerian guy.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I took a lot from my own relationships with these individuals, and not just mine, and several like of my friends. I just kind of took a lot of it. But one of the main questions I got with a lot of people, like if my husband shows up to my events where you saw him, he's always behind the scenes fixing stuff.
Yes.
How did your husband feel when he read this?
Because, and also it's because of the similarities between you and Maita. So I'm sure when he read that, he was just
Yes.
interesting.
Don't worry.
So how did you might as well let us know, how does he feel about the story?
Okay, two thing I want to tell you is that when I started writing, he's a big reader like myself. Actually, he reads more than I, like 10 times more than I do. And I said, do you want to read this? He says, nope, write and finish. I'll read when you're done. So my husband read the first draft after I'd been writing for a whole year. He didn't even try, and I would have been curious, right? I would have gone to see.
Yes, I would have snuck into that laptop and read it by then.
And so when I gave it to him and I let him read it, I came back and he goes, a whole year and you were writing about your exes. Okay.
I love it. It's a valid point. It's a valid point.
Okay. I'm like, and he goes, look, if it's therapy, it helps you let knock yourself out. But the most important thing he said, he's like, maybe that's an artistic process. He's like, Adele writes and sings about her exes. Taylor Swift writes and sings about her exes. A lot of musicians, the most powerful songs that have been written in history are when someone actually wrote about something that they experienced or whatever. So he says to me, your artistic expression, by all means, go for it. So here we are.
And you know what? I'm going to go back to that point of it's more believable, whether it's in music, in any form of art, right? Whether it's a painting, whether it's music, whether it is a book, when you put yourself in there and you are doing something that, or you're writing about something that you know, right? That nobody can dispute. We can't dispute, for example, with me being a South African sitting in South Africa for all of my life, I cannot negotiate the nuances of immigration with you, right? I don't know that, right? Anybody who hasn't been in a relationship with a Caucasian man, for example, can't come to you and say that this is not true. So you're writing from a point of truth, and I think that that is a very important thing to incorporate in any form of writing. It doesn't have to be autobiographical, but the truth element of it, right? I think that sometimes it's also referred to as suspension of disbelief, right? Because it gets you to the point where you think, okay, this is so believable that it can live in my mind. And even if I'm not opening the book, the story can keep playing in my head because there's something that is tangibly true in what she's talking about that I can't negotiate. And I think that's a very powerful thing.
You know, just before
So
we come to your next one, just one little point that I wanted to say, you know, for example, a lot of it, you also have to be a bit vulnerable. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. One thing I will tell you that is a fact. Maita was suffering from adult acne, right? She had a problem with her acne and she was trying to figure out. I had a very horrible bout of adult acne.
Okay.
And I remember just the idea of putting it in there was to make her look more human, because a lot of our protagonists in movies, they're always perfect. They have the
perfect. That's true. That's true.
No, she had issues with her skin, and I did too. And I, you know, a long way to look like this. Caring for my skin and all of that. And I put it in the book because that was a personal journey that I actually went through and how it affects self-esteem. You know, how she got into that date with Ade. She was, how can you possibly like me when I have all these pimples on my face? That was the reality for me at some point. And I just wanted to put some of that stuff in there, but in a nice way, in a fun, relatable way.
And you know what the power of that vulnerability is as well is the notion of representation. I always say that representation is not just the color of your characters, right? It's the human experiences, what people go through, knowing that I'm not the only person who goes through a certain thing, right? So somebody else who might have gone through adult acne sees this book and says, oh, okay, I'm seen. Let me read this character a little bit more because I feel like I'm understood, I'm seen, and it's easier for me to read this type of work because I'm in it as well. So I think that is very important in a story. So this kind of does link to what we were saying. My next question is, what actually inspired the story? You spent a whole year writing. You have to have held on to something that made you want to keep writing. So what inspired the specific story? Besides what your husband said, of course, that you were doing your own therapy.
So, it took me a total of 3 years to be done, to say, it was 2021 when I said, this is the final draft. The story went through so many changes. At one point, Ade was gone for real. And then, of course, I brought him back to life. Yes.
Thank goodness, because what?
Story. I want to just go back to a few years ago when I was younger, not many years ago. I started writing. I used to write as a kid. I used to write in school. I went to a boarding school in Zimbabwe, and I would handwrite in a book. People loved reading those books. They were very popular amongst my friends. And over the years, I've always written, but never done anything with it. And then one time I'm at work, and I'm a physical therapist. That's what I do. And I think we were just exchanging stories about relationships and so forth. And I started telling one of my own relationship experiences. And when I tell a story, I think I like to give you the setting. I will describe a character. Like everyone just stopped and leaned in like, oh my God. And then what happened? Oh no, he didn't. Oh wait, what? You know, it was just like I was telling this thing. And so we had to go back to work. People came back afterwards like, okay, you've got to finish the story. What then happened? And oh my God, they were so into it. And as I was telling it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty interesting. People are interested in this type of a story because I'm talking to an all-American crowd and I'm telling them this story about me, and it was very relatable, even though they couldn't relate. They'd never traveled from this place to that place, like things I've done.
Yeah.
But they were into it that I got home and I just started typing. It just was telling a story and people being interested. And I realized that I had that love for writing that I was using it in storytelling, but now I wanted to write it down. And oh my gosh, I felt rejuvenated. Like I was thrilled to come home every day and start writing. It was just like I found my space again, which I'd lost over the years because, life happens. So
And have those colleagues since read the book?
I don't know. Oh, that was a couple of years
that
ago.
would be interesting.
I mean, I don't work with them anymore.
Okay.
I have some of them on my social media, I believe, like on Instagram and stuff. I don't know if they've read. I don't know,
Okay.
and it may not even be that exact story that I was telling. Link the story in the book with whatever it is, and maybe they don't even
remember. Okay, because it was your moment, actually. It was your awakening. I hear you.
They may not
I hear you.
but a lot of my, people that I've worked with have all come and said, yay, go for it. And I'll tell you something. This is an exclusive. One of my ex-boyfriends, who happens to be Nigerian, it is not Ade.
It's not Ade. I was about to say Ade. Is it Ade?
No.
Did you end up with Ade now that we're talking about Ade?
Very Zimbabwean. But no, but for real, he sent me a very lovely text message. He's like, oh, I see. He says to me, I see you finally wrote that book. So I'm like, I must have been talking about writing. We did it years ago. You wrote that book. I'm very proud of you. I've been seeing your clips. Should I be worried? Because in all my clips, people always ask me, it's about exes. It's about, there's a Nigerian guy. There's this. I say to him, do not be worried. Please go and buy a copy.
I like that he was a little bit nervous. I like that. Good for him.
It's about, Nigerian exes, there's romance, and like, don't worry about it, but you go buy a copy for you and your wife and your whole clan,
Yes, please. The thing
that struck most with me was he actually said, you finally wrote the book. So I'd been talking about wanting to just write for years. And a lot of people come up to me and said, oh, you finally did it. I didn't realize how much I talked about it.
And I believe, like I was saying, that is the hurdle. The hurdle is finally doing it. Once you've done it, right, we can often repeat what you've already done. But when you don't have like a premise to go from, you don't know if you can do it, right? Now you've proven to yourself that you can do it, and we're waiting for the sophomore sometime soon, hopefully.
Maybe.
Okay, so it brings, actually, the whole thing about exes actually brings me to my next question, which is, how difficult was it for you to write from the male perspective? I often wonder with authors, male and female, right, that when you are writing a different gender, and especially in a story as delicate as this one, whether you feel like you are struggling to represent the other gender in any form.
Yes, that was pretty hard. And I honestly didn't even think about it as a thing until I started getting questions from people at my events. Like, someone says to me, how did you get into the male head? Because, I wrote from every character's perspective. And I feel like you were spot on, because men never talk about their emotions. Women always speak about being heartbroken, right? It's easy for us to talk about how we're heartbroken, but you never understand how a man gets heartbroken too. He has emotions. The macho outside. But in this book, I looked at his head and he is heartbroken. He's shattered. He's sharing that emotion. And so does Chris in his own way. I'll be honest with you and say it wasn't intentional. I didn't sit here and go, how would a man react to this? I just was writing. What I thought was, I just wrote it. And when it was done, what I had done, the only way that I could authenticate it, I gave my husband to read, obviously, and I said to him, is this how a guy would, he made me change a few things. There's one where in my early script, I described what Maita was wearing from Chris's perspective, and I went into detail, like, oh, she was wearing. He's like, we don't check on all that. Men don't care that wearing a belt that's this, that, and whatever. It's like, it looks cute, but I'm not going into that, So he helped me like just kind of scale down a few things. But I won't say that it wasn't difficult. It just wasn't a thing when I was writing. I swear I just wrote this. I guess it just happened. And
it was very believable though. So I suppose that you have always been probably aware without knowing that you were aware of the differences and the different ways in which we navigate the same thing, because this is a romance/suspense book. And I think maybe at this point we can talk a little bit more about the book without spoiling it for the ladies or whoever is on here. I see a lot of ladies, that's why. I don't mind spoiling on author interviews because I feel like part of it is a bit of a tease to the book, right? But I also don't want to spoil to an extent that somebody feels like, oh, okay, what's the use of reading the book now because you've told me everything, So I want to strike that balance. But in case you guys didn't know, Turning Tables is Alice's debut novel. And in this novel, we follow three main characters and she writes from all of their perspectives, right? This is Chris, this is Maita, and this is Ade. And there is a kind of suspense element to this romance story that she is telling. It is kind of like I would call it a love triangle, but I do want to put in the other lady that comes later on in life. So I don't know if it's a love square or a love triangle, but there's definitely, they're all gunning for the lady in the middle, right? The man that is at some or other point in the story. And it is a story of second chance romance as well as various other themes that are very pertinent in our society at the current moment, right? Things like abuse, things like gender roles, things like family and family's influence in love, things like friendships and friendships' influence in love, and things of that nature. And I wanted to say that I'll be honest with you, I've never read a romance with a suspense element, right? At some point in my reading, everyone, from the sister to the friends to the parents, was a suspect, right? I was like, because I went in there after reading the after reading the synopsis, and I was like, something is going to happen, but who is going to do it? So I was like, yeah, it's the sister. No, it's the friend. No, it's the parents. So I was like, definitely one of them is doing it. And I had the feeling, obviously, that something was looming, like I'm saying, even though I didn't know what it could be, right? And I love that part that I went into the story not knowing what would happen, but I knew that something was about to happen. And I think that's a very important thing about suspense, right? The suspension was so well that at some point I started suspecting all the main characters as well. I was like, it's one of them. One of them is going to do it. But at some point I'm like, no, at which point, how are they going to do that? But I'm like, something is going to happen. What feedback have you had around the suspense element of this particular story?
Okay, so I'll first start by saying I'm self-published. Okay, so I had to do everything myself, including deciding the genre. I designed the book cover myself.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. I love the cover, by the way. I do love it. I love how our main female character is so centered, right? And I think that it also gives this illusion, since we're talking suspense, right? These two in the background, how her face looks like. I feel like you captured that something wild is about to happen here.
Yeah, so I had to do everything cover to cover. It was me figuring this thing out, but I've never done this before. So one of the things was figuring out the genre, and I didn't know how many types of genres are out there. So my first instinct was, okay, this is definitely romance, and multicultural romance, right? I didn't put thriller, psychological thriller in there because I just thought, okay, I'm going to make it a clean cut romance, multicultural. And then when I got feedback, people started writing reviews. Even on some of my reviews, someone says, no, this is a psychological thriller. I'm like, psychological thriller should be more of there should be more suspense from the beginning to the end. Like, but no, I got so much positive reviews with regards to this being more romance and thriller combined. So now I'm just calling it a romance psychological thriller, and
good for you.
A lot of my fans love the twist in the end. They just did not see any of that coming. And it makes me happy because guess what? I don't read romance books. Not at all.
Oh, I
No,
started last year. Please
I,
do yourself a favor. Like it's one of those, I call them palate cleansers, right? It's one of those when you've read so much heavy stuff, you really do need. But this was not that kind of romance though. So that's why I'm like, I've never read a romance like this.
I'll tell you what I love. I love a good mystery. I love a good thriller. I love,
Ooh.
even when I watch a movie, I want you to give me the pieces and I'm solving it. And my thing is to solve it before the end. Like I'm one of those, like
Mm.
I love
Mm.
a whodunit mystery. And it came as no surprise.
Mm.
Even as I was telling this love story, I just had to. I couldn't resist
Yes.
to throw in some mystery because that's what I like. Main,
Mm.
and I just want someone to do someone to. I'm not morbid, but
Mm.
someone kill somebody.
Something must happen, please.
Whatever.
I hear you. I hear you. And you know, by the time that twist comes along, I don't know how you did it, but for me, the characters involved in the twist, I had already laid my guard down around that. Obviously, I had seen who the psycho was, and I was like, okay, this one is psychotic. Hopefully we do not stay here too long, but I did not see that part of it happening. And I think you did it very well. And I was saying in the vlog, right, that my thing with the, if I might give my opinion of the book pace, my thing with the pace is that the first half for me was very, very slow,
So
right? And I love being paced, right? It is a slow burn, but I love being paced, right? But the second half I feel is that's when you went in. I was like, what? I'm not putting this down. And a part of me felt like you should have given that to me sooner so that I could have felt like, okay,
you know,
listen, from
whatever it will be, I'll always be thinking of you, and that's why I love feedback. You know, I'm gonna
mm,
read it, I'm gonna write it from my perspective as always, but also like
mm,
people want to read, and I love a slow burn. If you were to go,
mm,
you know how you create your own profile on Netflix. All of my
mhm,
shows
mhm.
are gonna be in foreign languages. They're gonna be slow. They're gonna be mystery. We're gonna solve a mystery, or we're gonna be, but it's a slow, think, cerebral.
Mm.
So I'm that girl. You know, I can sit down
Okay,
and
I get you. I
you.
get you.
Yeah.
I'm not a patient reader or consumer of art, right? I feel like if you have promised me drama, we must start with the drama now. Why are we waiting for the drama? You said there is drama. I want it now.
You
So when I'm going
want,
through,
you want fireworks.
yes, and it doesn't actually have to be the climax of the story, but I want to feel like it's here, it's coming, it's about to get there. So I feel like the slow burn is kind of like a temptation, né? And because I'm not patient, right? I'm like, child. And the thing is, I am grateful that I can't skip words. I can't skip paragraphs. When I'm reading a book, I literally read every punctuation mark and everything.
Yeah.
And when I'm reading a slow burn, it kills me because I'm like, I wish I could just go to chapter 10. Where does the action actually start? But I hear you.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
hear you. There are people that like to be enticed in that manner. And I suppose, like I was saying in the beginning, that you have to write the book that you want to read, right? And you have to trust that the book that you have written is a book that somebody else will also want to read. And like I'm saying, when you did bring it, I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I've been wanting. But I'm glad you managed to balance those two out. I really am. So we spoke a little bit about this at the beginning, right? One of the themes that you explore in the book is immigration and how or when love finds you in that season and the loneliness that is linked to it, etc. Being an immigrant yourself, would you say romantic companionship is one of the things one seeks out to remedy the loneliness? Besides this, what other challenges do immigrants face when pursuing love in a different country?
Yes, that's very interesting. So romance definitely is a way for people to let out. You know, as an immigrant, you get here, you're trying to figure out like where you stand in this new environment, work, school, immigration processes and papers, as we call them here. You know,
Mm,
your
mm,
right to live and work in a foreign country, or your residency status, as it is. It's a lot to navigate all of that. And sometimes your social system, your social network is where you go and let loose. If you don't have a friend who speaks the same language, or someone who can just relate, and you can just for a minute just speaking Shona or Ndebele or whatever your language is, it can get a little frustrating, So there's platonic relationships that allow for that, right? You've got your girlfriends,
Yes.
but romantic relationships are just as equally important. Like you just want to, you want to be loved. You want your whole life to move forward. You don't want to come to a certain country, and because you're so busy trying to settle, you sort of put one aspect of your life in the back burner, which is in this case life. So you want to do all those things at the same time, and that can be very challenging because learning so many different things. It's like juggling so many balls, and one really difficult one because now you have to cross the cultural barriers. You have to explain yourself, your language, the food you eat, and all of that good stuff. And then if it's a racial thing, it adds another layer to it because now you're crossing into another territory that you may not have been familiar with. Some people may have had that, where they're coming from. And another misconception is that if we're from Africa, we're all the same. People think that if you're Zimbabwean and you date a Kenyan guy, it's easy because, hey, all Africans. And I had that said to me through a line in the book when I worked at a hospital in London, and there's a Ghanaian elderly lady who came in. She couldn't speak a word of English. They paged me to come and translate. They're like, what did you translate? And I'm like,
they knew where you were from. They knew that you were Zimbabwean.
And I had to be like, no, guys, I don't speak.
I'm so sorry to disappoint you guys.
Whatever you don't know what you don't know, So I wanted to talk about that. You see, that's what I said when I was writing this book. It was those conversations I wanted to bring to the table. Like, we're different. We eat different food. I learned that too when I moved, when I left Zimbabwe. When I lived in Zimbabwe, growing up in Zimbabwe, I left when I was 23. I really feel like I lived in a bubble. I thought that everybody what we eat speaks the way we speak. I knew we're different, but I just assumed that it would be easy. And then I come here, I'm talking to Nigerians, and oh my God, are we different? I speak to Ghanaians, Nigerians, people from Cameroon. It's like, oh, we are so similar and yet so in a very beautiful way, and better than the other. I say like, no one's better than the other. We're just different, and it's okay. Different. So that's what I'm trying to talk about with that type of content. So yes, we do have to do all of that as an immigrant. It's something you absolutely cannot ignore.
And tell me something when it comes to the romantic love, because that's what your story is centered around. Are there no elements of fear, especially like you're saying, for somebody who has been living in a bubble in their little African country and then coming into a nation that's cosmopolitan with people from all over the world, and now you have not necessarily to pick your love interest, but you have to you are falling in love with people that are different to the people that you would have fallen in love with back home? Is there no element of, I don't know this place, I don't know the space, I don't know how to navigate this world, and is it safe for me to choose him in this situation? Wouldn't I rather choose another Zimbabwean for me to feel a little bit safer?
It is very intimidating, is one word I would use. It's intimidating in just not knowing. For example, when you're in a relationship with someone, you also sort of become a relationship with their friends and their families. You don't know how you're accepted, or how your family is going to accept them. And I think Chris has that issue. I brought it up with the Chris part of it.
Yes, character, yeah.
Our date was the opposite. His family was more accommodating, right? Although the mother would have loved a Nigerian girl because it's not.
Yes.
And our parents are older. They're more traditional, and they would just prefer it. It makes life easier. Let's put it that way. If you same, right? So yes, it's very intimidating to get into this type of relationships, to find something and your place in that relationship, whether it's a black, white, or African to African, whatever it be. But I think the most important thing is once you're in that relationship, do not lose yourself. Do not let one's culture be diminished by the other. And not allow yourself to adopt too much of something and almost about your own. I think it needs to be an equal blending and acceptance of both cultures. And again, I addressed that between Mayita and Chris, where Chris almost wanted his culture to dominate. You know, the music.
Dominate, yeah.
Listen to my music. Let's do this, and I don't like this. Mayita fought a good fight. I know
she did.
I know some people, and I'm pretty sure other people who may be watching this may know some people who've gone into relationships and have lost themselves. They're like,
themselves.
oh my God, she eats this now and doesn't eat that, or look, has she changed dressing? You almost change who you are to whatever the other partner wants you based on their cultural preferences. I just throw that in that's something we have to really learn to balance. And some people don't, and yeah, it's pretty hard. So it's tough. It's really,
I can imagine.
yeah,
I can imagine. And then the other theme that I did pick up in the book is the whole idea of gender expectations, right? Women expecting men to be providers, men expecting women to submit. Would you say these expectations are reasonable in the way they are shown in Turning Tables, in the sense that you see it with Maita and her friends, right? That as a female, this is what I expect from a male, right? You also see it, like you said, with the Chris character, and also actually in a different way with Ade, that because he's male, he expects to be a provider, right? And then for Chris, it's the other way around. He is male, but probably of a different culture, like you're saying, and he expects that you'll do your part and I will meet you when I need to meet you, when those two parts are actually colliding. But so long, I expect you to be more to me than I am to you, if that makes any sense. So can you talk us through this theme a little bit?
Yes, so I threw that in because it is a reality. So growing up in Zimbabwe, and I cannot speak for any other country, I can't speak for South Africa, but I'll speak for my experience. I remember a young girl in college. I went to the University of Zimbabwe, even just early dating. It was an expectation from us girls that a man would take care of it all. Like, you go on a date, you could literally go on a date with just your bus fare, find your way into town, and what you eat, what happens on that date, you expect that this person's going to take care of it, right? We even went as far as sometimes bringing a friend along. Like, I don't even know why that is a thing. That is just
to a date. Okay, that's new. Okay.
Not so much a date. So if a guy says, let's go to the club or whatever, is going on a party or whatever, there's a party.
Okay. No, I get that.
Fine, and bring your three girlfriends. When you're at that place, this guy is going to cater for you and your girlfriends, whatever it may be, whether it's getting you drinks or whatever. You know, we sort of have an expectation that you're going to take care of me and my friends, right? And guys loved to do it. In fact, it showed that I guess they felt like they had an edge. It was a way to attract girls. I don't know what it was. So there was an expectation on both sides. Like, a man would get to a place and be like, no, I'm taking care of it. Now you come over here and it's not the case. Hello, I think she's frozen. So you come to America and that's not the case. You go to England and a guy is not expecting to pay for you or your friends. It's 50-50, you know. So it was that. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. I can hear you now, yes. I think that there was a little bit of an interruption, sorry.
So what I was saying is that when you then come overseas, you realize that's not the case. Guys do not expect to pay for you and your friends. In fact, you might have to pay your own way with certain things. So that's a thing that Mayita was trying to sort of come to terms with. And Chris just couldn't, for the life of him, understand why he had to pay your way. And if you're a student and you're paying all this money at this expensive school, then surely you can afford to buy your own lunch or whatever. You know, so I just wanted to play around with that. And I personally think now, in hindsight, as a mature 40-something-year-old mother of two, I think it was unrealistic. It was such a bad thing for women to expect men, especially at that age, to just cover so much. Like, I just think our mentality is too demanding. And then I also think that to some degree, men should, you know, in the first place,
they should want to, at least. I think that was my frustration with the Chris character. I was like, you should want to, at the very least, That is something that you should want to do. And especially because you can do it, because we see later on that he's got the means to do it, and he understands to a certain degree whether or not he's supportive the path that Maita has taken. So sometimes I was like, I don't get it. You suggest an extravagant getaway to a student who is an immigrant, who has told you their financial battles and what they are working towards. And then you tell us about going halfway on this specific trip. Like we are not going to the deli next door, but where do you think I'm getting the money from? Like, does it make sense?
Right.
Like, so for him especially, I was like, no, man, no, this is borderline toxic to some extent, you know? But and I like that you did bring that in, because I will say that I do think that there's a certain generation, maybe even here in South Africa, of men letting go of that
responsibility
expectation. You're right.
Not so much,
because I do think that there was a time where men, that's how they showed that they were men. But I think that there is now a generation that's on some, no, thank you. You wanted to come out and party with your friends. What did you think you were going to drink? What did you think you were going to eat? Handle yourselves, you know? And I don't know how I feel. I really don't know how I feel about that. Especially if...
I think they should.
Especially if... No, but if the invitation is for... Okay, I don't expect you to cover my friends, but if it's you who has invited me, right? Could have been on my couch eating noodles, you know? Could have been on my couch having popcorn. If you have invited me and you wanted my presence, then please. And then at the very least, I don't expect you to cover everybody that I've come with, and I'll probably make it clear to them as well. But if you have taken me out of my house, then I'm your responsibility, and that's just it.
I agree. And I also am very traditional in my thinking. Again, the Ama 2000s, as they call them, or whoever can throw stones at me. I do believe that a man should woo a woman in the beginning. Like, I just feel like those first days, come on, the honeymoon period, take me out, open the door for me, you know. And then of course, once we get into the nitty-gritties of relationships, we can go halves. I don't mind paying for your dinner or whatever. The first couple of days, you're gonna have to pay for me, honey. That's how that's gonna go.
And let's talk about this. I feel like both Ade and Chris did it in different ways, right? I loved Ade's approach. You are whining and dining this woman. This person you have acknowledged as a person that you want to pursue something romantic with, right? I saw the romance in what he did. With Chris, the thing with Chris is that there were so many red flags, right? But to some extent, because I suppose of what Maita was going through, I wanted that for her, right? I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to be authentic. I wanted it to be the thing that is kind of like a salve on her wound, right? Because she's going through so much. But at the same time, I was like, no, there's an element of stalker, an element that I'm not comfortable. Okay, pursue me, but don't pursue me like that. Like, please, there's a point. There's a point that you cross. And I felt like from the very beginning, Chris was crossing a lot of points from the flight, from the pill. In fact, let's talk about that. How does a character like Maita allow herself to be? Because I feel like she works in a somewhat, it might not be medicine, but she's aware, right, of the implications of certain things, right? So how does she allow herself to be given medication by a stranger, as well as the same stranger that just medicated her wants to intoxicate her? Like, how does she get to that point?
Let's first put you've touched on so many little things that I want to, you know, if I can. The first thing, let's look at her age. She's 23, I think. And remember, at 23, I don't know about you, but 21 to 23, it was just like, you know what it's like when you go to a party and you drink too much. You know you shouldn't be doing this, but it feels good right now. I'm gonna do it, right? A little irresponsible behavior at that.
True.
Number two, there was severe turbulence, and I hope I captured the fear and fright of.
Yes, you did.
She was praying. She was saying Kosiami. She was praying in her language, right? So she was very, terrified. I apologize for my kids.
No, it's fine. I've got kids. I get it. Don't worry about us. Don't worry. We get it. We get it. We get it.
Into context, let's put her nerves. She's really terrified. And remember, she even thought about it. It did cross her mind. But when that pill literally fell into her lap, I think, and the plane was going all this way, and people were screaming, she probably thought, you know what, I'm either gonna die here on this flight, or I'm like, pick your pick your way to go.
Okay, I hear you.
Thinking that was her thought process in that moment. Would she have done it if she was in a very serene, comfortable place where she can really think? No, probably not.
So it was a survival. It was a moment where she had to choose survival. Okay, I hear you. I hear you.
Genuinely was feeling scared. She was praying. People were screaming. Going through terrible turbulence. And if you've ever been, I have been in terrible turbulence where I honestly thought, like, you know what, it's about to go down.
This is it. This is it. You were saying your prayers as well.
Very terrifying. And we were flying into a center in El Paso, Texas. It was horrible. The pilot go somewhere else. That's how bad it was. I think I took from that as well. Again, I like to write from my own experiences. So I just put myself in that situation again and said, if someone had thrown me in that moment, as whatever it is, that's number two. So number three, I also wanted to say that a lot of people in the book discussions I've had in the past have talked about that box of wine. Listen, the decision is split in half. Some people believe that is the most romantic thing anyone can do, and they wish someone could just do it for them. And others are like, psycho alert.
For me, it depends on which part in this relationship, right? So I probably would have been on some, oh, so cute if it had happened later. But because it happened so soon, I was like,
but he's paying.
Where did you get let's start from my address. Where did you get my address? It doesn't matter what you are delivering. Eh? No. So for me, there was like, sorry?
He'll call your sister. That shows that he's serious, right? And another girl who was I think this was in Canada. I remember she says to me, I think women just don't know how to be loved. A guy showers you with attention and love. You say, oh, it's too much. And then when he doesn't, you say, oh, but you're not doing. Like, what do women want? And I was like, I don't know.
We want pacing. I will tell you what we want. We don't want to be bombarded. Like, when they call it love bombing, we don't want to be love bombed, because that is already like a signal of, oh my God, something is just not right. Something is not right. You don't feel secure when you're being love bombed. You don't feel like this is a safe space. And as Baita's character actually, initially, even after that grand gesture, was also questioning, right? Whether this is really, because you don't feel safe. But a gentle pursuit, just like what Ade did, for example, right, makes you feel like, oh, okay, I've settled in. I'm kind of understanding this person. And if he should do a gesture of this nature, it's within character. I get it. It's not because he wants to win me over. Because if you are won over by those actions, no one knows what happens when you are actually in that relationship, right? Because it's not consistent. You are not going to give me a case of wine every single month. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It really isn't. It's for you. It's a means to an end. And if your mind alerts you to that, then there's something wrong with how that pursuit is happening, right?
And I'm pretty sure you've probably experienced, maybe not you, but I'm sure you've seen or heard of people who come and say, oh, I met this guy and he bought me this, or he did so much so soon. And you're like, ooh, okay. So it does give, you need to pause a little bit and just think about what's going on and not be taken by all the material stuff.
But I think you represented both sides of the perception in the sense that I feel like Maita's friend and sister really thought that it was quite cute, quite endearing. Wow, this man is doing all of this. Forget about him. Here's the person that... And I was just sitting there thinking, maybe if you had made him black, maybe I would have been less... Because I'm like,
because
what's with this white man? Like, what is it exactly that is actually going on right now? So maybe that also had to do with my suspicions. But honestly, I don't feel like love bombing is a healthy. And I think that you do, even if it was not intentional, you do kind of bring it out in that part of the relationship.
Yeah.
So talking about themes again, another strong theme in the book is the whole notion of second chance romance. I, for one, like you can see, maybe I'm a cynic to some extent. I, for one, do not believe in such. Like, I feel like if you're gone, you're gone. Thank you, very please. You had your chance. Bye bye. Though it was beautiful to watch how it all unfolded, right? And how you treated it so realistically in the book. It also gave the sense that love can be messy, right?
Yeah.
Because if we watch how their love story in isolation, right, of whatever else happens in their lives, right? When we look at Mayita and Ade, when we watch how their love story unfolds, right, you can see that love can be messy, but eventually, I suppose you end up where you are meant to be, right? Was this messaging intended on your part?
Yes. I wanted to show that sometimes timing is everything, right? In relationships. Again, let's put her age into context. When it starts, because I do jump from year to year and back and forward. She's 23, she's young, she's bubbly. Her nickname is Bubbles. By the time
Yes.
we're done with the story, she must be 23, 4, 5, maybe. Is it 2 years later? That's in 2003, ends in 2007. Oh, 4 years later, right? She's seeing the world differently. You know, think of yourself, what you wanted in a relationship at 21, 22, 23, and then when you're 25, 6, 7, 8, you're looking back going, no. So the reason why she wanted to go back, I think, is because she'd matured a little bit. And it's because when she was 23, Ade was maybe 29. So he was already past the young and bubbly age. He was ready to settle down. So the question begs, must we date people who are in the same space as us in terms of expectation, age, generation? Or if we date people who are older and their expectations are different. So she's young, she wants to party, she still wants to explore the world. He's 29, probably looking at 30 going, okay, I need to settle down. So he wants to get married. He still wants to do so much. And that's when it didn't work out, right?
Yes.
Then
Yes.
when she's now at that age, she's looking back, oh, wait, and he's moved on, maybe, or maybe, you know. So my whole point here was to talk about in relationships, timing is very important. Expectations, and sometimes we do stupid things because we're young, and we can always redeem ourselves. I do believe in second chances, and the most important thing is that she went back and said to him, I want you back. Women do not do that. We're afraid to show that vulnerability. Sorry, we will die a long suffering yearning and never ever, you know. And I posed this question to I think it was in London when I had a book event, and I asked the women, I was like, would you ever go to a guy and say, look, yeah, I'm sorry, I do want you back? No. Only one girl said she would, because women feel like they can't express that, and I just think that that's a problem. I think we should be able to fight for what we want, and that's what Mayita did. So
You know what, for me though, I think that also the context around how they broke up, right? I can understand why a woman would go back, right? Like you're saying, after maturing, after seeing life in a different way, would go back and want to make amends, not necessarily that they want this romance back, but want to kind of like settle that part, right? Because now I've matured, I've understood that that was not okay. I get that part of it, right? The other, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of Ades in the ocean. You know, we can always find somebody like you somewhere somehow. You know, but I hear you. And women are like that. Sorry.
That's what we think. We always think there's lots of fish in the sea until you're in there and you're drowning. You can barely find a good one.
There's no fish at all. There's actually no ocean. There's no ocean. There's no fish, nothing.
I had a good fish back there.
Yeah, yeah.
Fished it out of the water or not, you know. There's a lot of
I hear you.
we've done, you know, and a lot of women never admit to it. Some people would to their grave, they will never ever say, you know what, I want to go back to that guy.
I am some people. I would no ways. So okay, fine. Before we continue, we've got like 3 more questions to go. I did mention to Alice that I will be load shedding, but I'll still be online at about 8 o'clock. I just want to switch on my load shedding lamp so that we don't go into darkness. But in the meantime, I think that anybody who wants to ask any questions, whether you've read the book or not, in the comment section can go ahead and do that. After our questions, we will engage whoever is on the live. Just give me 2 seconds. So for everyone who doesn't know what load shedding is, it's like these national blackouts. We've been having the worst of them these past few months. So at least though we get a schedule, right? You know when the lights are going to go, you know when the lights are going to come back, so you can plan your life a little bit better. So my next question to you is that every character in this book has a vice, right? And there is absolutely no perfect character, right? There is no character that I felt like, oh my goodness. You know, I wanted to like Ade's mom, but I was like, Mama, like, you know, she was probably one of the characters, even though she's like a support character, right? But I wanted to like, yeah, they all have some kind of vice, and the vice doesn't have to be something awful, obviously, right? Was this your intention? Because I feel like it's easier sometimes for me to read realistic and real characters in books, as opposed to, I want a bit of the fiction that makes them a little bit more perfect, but at the same time, I want to know that they actually deal with real life issues as well, and they're real. Was this part of your intention?
Yes, so this was my intention. I just wanted it to be authentic. I wanted to show that people are not perfect. No one is perfect, right? We all have our flaws. We all have, and the most important thing I wanted to show was what leads us to making those decisions. So these are not people who are just mean for the sake of it, right? I show you why Maita decided to leave and come back, and why she reacted the way she did. The only question you as the reader has to ask is, was her reaction justifiable? I show you why Chris did what he did through the course. He had his own issues, right? And that's what led him to do what he did. He didn't set out to be what he was. I don't want to give any spoilers. So the question again is, do you think he really was that because of just his way he was raised, who he is, or was he just being bad? And the same thing goes to Ade. A lot of my readers have said Ade was the good guy until, you know, we had this little issue with Norma. You know, oh, but why did he treat Norma so bad? But he was reacting to things that had been done to him by her, right?
So exactly, because Norma was not perfect either, right? None of your characters are perfect, actually, like I was saying, yeah.
But a lot of their actions are reactions to things that have been done to them. So the question is, some of the things that we do in life, we're not bad people. We're just reacting to what's been thrown at us. And that's where that was coming from. I just wanted them to be real. I wanted them to be authentic. And I will tell you, so I did say I self-published, right? So I went through the entire process of editing. I hired professional editors. I tried to make it as close to traditional publishing as I could. And I had a series of editors of different types. I had an older Australian gentleman edit my book. I wanted it that I had a young, you know, like a different type of people from all over. And one of the things he said, this particular gentleman, he loved his story. He says to me, well, I will say, these are in his notes, your characters are highly unlikable. If that was your intention, then well done.
Well, I agree with him. I am there with him. He told you the truth. That was true.
He's like, if that was your intention, then job well
Then
done.
you did it well.
You may want to go back and make them a little likable. So I had to sit there so when you get an editor, they can make whatever suggestions. You are the ultimate decider of whether you'll take it. So I sit on it for weeks. I asked my husband, I was like, what should I do? Should I just soften her up a little bit or soften this person? And my husband said, you know what? People are going to love them or not love them. It has to be what you want. You write them the way you want. I just left them the way they were. So I left.
And you know what?
And
that is actually great advice from your husband, because I feel like a character shows themselves to you, I feel, as a writer, in the manner in which they want to be portrayed, right? And those who get it will get it, those who don't get it won't get it. And it is your responsibility, because I feel like maybe as a writer, you do treat these characters as like your babies, right? So you can't make this person anything that they're not. If this is who they are, then that's who they are.
Yeah. You actually start to live and sleep and dream your characters. Like, oh my gosh, it becomes such a big process. I had to ponder upon certain characters to, I moved this thing around so many times, chapters, sometimes cut out. It was a lot, but it is a labor of love. And you, the writer, must be happy with what you get in the end. So it was intentional. That's the long and short.
Okay. As long as we know. So the last part of our Lit Author Lives usually is around book recommendations, right? And that's really in the spirit of letting readers know that authors are also readers. I know we spoke about this with you in the beginning, that you've always been an avid reader from a very young age. I did mention to you that I'd ask for 3 recommendations, right? So the first book that I'd like us to talk about is the first book you remember that transformed your life in any way, whether it was ideology or it was it fanned your passion to write, or that it made you feel seen or known.
When I saw that, I'm like, Lord, how do I pick? I've read so many different things, and I was trying to dig deep. And the 3 books that always come to mind, the first one that I read, I think I was probably 19 or 20 years old, I don't remember, was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I've read that book several times over the years, and I've read so much more of his work. I think The Alchemist is one book. First of all, it answers 2 of your questions. It's the one I would recommend for life, because you said what book would I
Yes.
The Alchemist is fiction, but it is also, in my opinion, a self-help book. It's a classic novel about this boy called Santiago who goes on find treasure, and you have it. There you go. That for me, so many different topics that you can touch on about never giving up on, following your dreams, getting up and going for it. And you always get a lot of obstacles. Like when he took that journey to find his personal legend, he encountered a lot of obstacles, right? And each one made him stronger for the next one. Only to get to the end and discover that the treasure was really where he was, under that big tree. Like, sometimes the thing you're looking for is right there with you. But life takes you through a journey to find how much of a treasure you have inside you. And I think it's a really good book. If you haven't read it, you can show them again. Those that haven't read it, that is the book that for me would be my recommendation for life, and just a guide through life,
Okay, so you smashed 2 of our 3 recommendations. So the second one, or third one, we should say, is what is the first noteworthy book you read written by somebody like you, or someone who could have had the same existence as you? And it doesn't have to be by a female, it can be by a male as well.
Oh, that one was hard. I scratched my head up. So I ended up just choosing someone that I thought, one of the books that I've read, and I've never forgotten the book, The Kite Runner by Khalid.
I haven't read it.
Yes. So it's not
going to... But I haven't read it, but this is the book she's talking about.
Yes. And I think it was written shortly after the 9/11 tragedy, and the whole Afghanistan war and all of that followed. And I think the reason why that book resonated with me, and I read it a long time ago. I read it many, many, many years ago. So when I think about it, I can't tell you specifically what the story was about, but I do remember that
Yeah.
the author himself is an immigrant. I think he's from Afghanistan, and he moved to America as an asylum seeker with his family. And he's actually a physician who wrote this book. This book shows you the life and struggle of a young boy growing up in Afghanistan and some of the things traumatic events that happened in his life, and sort of it's a story of redemption. But what I like the most, whenever I read a book, I like to learn new things. And at that time, we were also biased about people from Iraq and Afghanistan. We thought the media and just everything that was going on after 9/11 was making them all look like villains. They were all bad. Or, never saw a human side to growing up in Afghanistan and the people that were victims of the wars that ensued, right? And this book is an amazing. It tells the story of how they got to seek asylum. It's fiction, and the things they go through. It just gave the Afghanistan war and the people a very human side through this story that was just it's a heart-wrenching, it's a sad book.
I've heard. That's why I've been avoiding it. I've heard that, listen, you have to have your box of Kleenex next to you.
But I tell you, in a very it's just one of those books that I really loved. And after he wrote that, he wrote another one called 1,000 Splendid Suns, and I read that. Sad story. But it's a reality about what's happening to people in other parts of the world, and you just get a glimpse of how other people are living, and it just makes you see them more human than whatever is portrayed on TV, right? And I'm still waiting for him to write a third. I think I heard he might have, because he hasn't written in years. But that's how much I like his work, that he wrote those two. I don't know if he's written another one. I think
I think there is a third one. I forget the name. I also only have the first two. I don't know the third one, but I think there is a third one out.
So that's the other book. And then, I still came up with 3 books, even though The Alchemist kind of done that. The book that I think he said that sort of made me want to write. I started writing technically when I was a teenager in high school, because I read a lot of Enid Blyton and Famous Five and whatever. Right?
Nancy Drews, etc. Yes.
Right? Little mysteries and all kinds of stuff based on the book. It made me want to write as an adult. And I think even this story is, if you read this author's work, you may see traces of me trying to imitate that. Her name is Gillian Flynn. Her most
It's Gone Girl. That's the only book I have by her, actually.
You need to study the first one. Her first book called Sharp Objects.
Is it Sharp Objects? Yes. I have never read it though, but I loved Gone Girl.
Yeah. Read Sharp. I mean, I've read all of hers, but I would say Sharp Objects I think it came out in 2006 or something, or 5. And I remember when I started reading her, when I read that book and I read the next, I was like, I love how she brings in this mystery and suspense, which I think subconsciously, as I was writing this romance and I threw in all of that, I just like something that just gets you at the end and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes. This book, I actually think that this was, I'm not big with, I actually do want to get into like the crime thriller, etc., right? But with this one, I had read it for a book club, right? And I did not see any of it coming. I knew something was wrong, right? But I did not see what unfolded coming. I was like,
what? Is that not okay? Does that make you see a similarity with Turning Tables?
Yes, exactly. Like I was saying, the twist.
Yeah.
The twist. I was like,
and then it's
I knew something was coming, but I didn't know this was it. Yes, I hear you.
So those are the books that that came to mind. But I mean, like I said, I started a book club and we read books every month. And actually, the book we just read, I want to recommend that just for the sake of love to learn about other cultures, other lives. Called Beyond the Beautiful Forevers. It's by Catherine Wu. It's about
Okay.
India. And I'll tell you something. This is the first book I read blind. I didn't read whether it was fiction or nonfiction. We recommended it, and I was so busy. I just got the book from the library, started on it, and only at the end it was nonfiction. Oh my God, it reads like fiction.
Like
And
fiction, I love that.
it's nonfiction, your heart will break because
Mm.
going on, when I discovered this actually did happen. Oh, so
What's the title again?
Beyond the Beautiful Forevers. Let me see if I have. I just posted it on my page because we were supposed to have the book discussion this weekend, and so let me see. How can I show it? There. Oh, wait.
Okay, but I've added the title in the comment section. No worries.
Beautiful
Behind. Okay, behind. Okay.
Boo.
It's behind, not beyond.
Is read it and just let me know what you think. I just
read it and weep, basically.
I'm fascinated by humans, countries. I love to just experience something different. And you read it and you have an understanding of India. Like if you watch Slumdog Millionaire and there's another movie on White Tigers or something on we all know what India is like and what happens in slums, but that's fiction, right? If you read this, you see that one thing I also learned is we're not very different in Africa. We have the same, we're fighting the same battles with the Indians and the Africans. It's all very interesting. It's non-fiction, but reads like fiction in a beautiful way. So yeah, that's what I just read, and I'm adding it to my list of books. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I feel like that's the point of this thing, right? Part of it is that you discover books that you didn't know about. And part of it is also that you get affirmations on books that you have already read that you actually also enjoyed, right? So I love the segment of Lit Author Lives because it does do that little bit of rejuvenation, even for the person, I suppose, who's recommending, because you have to get back to how you felt when you read that specific book, right? And I do believe that books are things, not necessarily that you have to remember every single character's name, etc., but there are things, just like stories are, that last forever. They stay with you once you've consumed it. Like, I don't think that I'm gonna forget Chris or Maida or Ade anytime soon, right? So if somebody says, oh, I've read Turning Tables, even if it's 3 years from now, I'll be like, oh, okay, I know that story. I know it because I've read it, right? Yeah. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your experience and your journey with this book, and especially for having overcome the hurdle of actually presenting us the book. And like I was saying, I do feel like authors, I feel like you can note the growth of an author through their work. So I hope that you are planning to give us a bit more. And these are stories that I think are important because I don't think that a lot of migration stories are told in the manner in which you have told. And I do encourage that you keep writing such stories, because like I said, representation doesn't always come in the form of characters that you put out there, but it's also in the form of experiences. And I do think that people do feel validated when they see themselves in books in whatever form that it comes in. Thank you so much for your time. We are going to read the comments, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for the platform. I'm just happy to share my work with people. And I was most excited when I could get my book to Africa, because you always think of home, no matter what you do.
Yes.
You're like, if I have this book, I want my people to be able to get to it. So it's on Amazon, right? But not everybody has this. So it's available in Zimbabwe and in South Africa at Exclusive Books. So that was one of my, I guess, highest achievements personally, because I said self-published, got to do all of this myself. So just to actually have your attention, and you being from South Africa and knowing that there are people out there who are actually reading it, it just makes me very proud and happy. And I'm encouraged to keep writing. So I'm praying right now to God for another story. Some people want tables too, but I don't know about that. I don't know.
Okay.
Something different. So just praying for inspiration from God. Seriously.
There's no rush. Actually, I take back my pressure because I do feel like creativity needs its time. But I hope though that you do give yourself that second book, because I feel like it's so important, especially if this is the kind of story that's been brewing for a while. You need to, how do I explain it? Like, I feel like that second, the sophomore is what affirms that, okay, you know what? I'm a writer. I have written 2 books. It's getting worse. Okay, let me just quickly go through these comments. Thank you for everybody else who has joined us during this time. So let me do this rather. So Scorpio Rising said, hello, ladies. Everybody was greeting while we first started. Lindy, Spororiro, and Bookish Nontli, Pat as well. Nontli was saying, oh, I think she was talking about, I don't know. It was quite early on. I'm just going through the comments to see if there is anything that we can definitely respond to. And Nontli thought it was a good idea to spoil the book because she's read it. Ompila says, hello from a choppy network due to load shedding. Load shedding has, yeah, anyway. But at least she managed to join. Thank you so much, Ompile. It's a monthly greeting, patch greeting. Loved the cover is what Nontli is saying. The cover is really something. I really actually loved what you did with the color on there as well. Loved it. Yes, that, like, you did so much. And I feel like ultimately, as much as I say that the characters are your babies, I feel like the actual finished work is also like your child, right? When you do offer it out there, you're like, I did the most. You carried it for more than a year. Carried you for more than a year, but just look at you. I'm sure you sit there and you just look at the book and you just admire it and you think, listen, I did this. I did this.
It's amazing because in the moment, oh my gosh, there's so many times I felt like, why did I even start this thing? It's stressful. It's easy to talk now and be like, yeah. But when I had to go through rounds and rounds of editing, I felt like I was back in school and I had homework, and I'm very particular about everything, the grammar, everything. It must be perfect. It took a lot. And so when I was done, I said to my husband, never again, I'm done. And guess what? People were like, oh, I don't read books, I do audio. I was like, oh, now I got to do an audiobook. And I did an audiobook. And it's out.
I saw on Instagram. Well done.
I'm proud of my audiobook because, first of all, I used 3 characters to read, which have. I have a Nigerian, and I have a white British guy reading Chris, and I have a girl, well, she's actually from Botswana. She's not Zimbabwean, but she reads, and I needed someone with a Southern African accent. It didn't have
yes. Yeah, I hear you.
It sort of sound the same. So it's Nomhle. She's actually a Tswana girl who read my part. And
that's great.
This came to life. It was amazing. But again, it was another process of editing. I literally had to audition these people. I had to find and different people send me their clips and I auditioned and narrated those 3. And then when they edited, I had to edit line for line, word for word, to make sure that they're reading exactly what's in the book.
What's in the book? I can imagine.
Well, I thought I was done with the book, So it's a lot of work. But when it's done, and now the audiobook is out and the reviews are pretty good, I think.
Where can people access the audiobook? Is it on Audible?
Yeah, it's on Audible.
Okay.
So I'll share the links with you. It's on Audible. You can download it.
But you can also just tag me on a story on IG and I'll reshare it.
Okay. Yeah. So it's definitely a labor of love. And when it's all said and done, you feel like you've given birth and you had a hard pregnancy and you're not going to have another child. And before you know it, you're pregnant again.
Yes, we want that second one. Conception, inception, whatever they want to call it, we want it. Lindy was also commenting on the cover, very beautiful. Nontli saying the ending was the bomb. I loved the fact that we could be happy at the end. Okay, a lot happened in the story. The twist was twisted. I agree. I agree. Zed, Hamamba, I think, says hello, love from Zambia. Hi, can't wait to read this book and fingers crossed on the signature DC area.
Ah, yes, she did. I think she said she's in the DC area, and I may, if I happen to be in that area doing a book signing or anything, should love to attend. So yeah, I'll definitely.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Oh, there's nothing like a signed copy. There is absolutely nothing. Okay. Pat says she's added it to her TBR. Lovely, love to hear it. Scorpio Rising says American men are not interested in paying for anything. Like that's kind of heartbreaking, you know. Like nothing.
Like, even when they're out here in America, African men still want to play that paying for everything role. So stick to it.
Interesting. Okay, I was asking if we were breaking up. So Nantli was saying there was a little bit of a breakup, but it's not bad. Zed Hamamba says, oh my God, yes, we did that going with other friends. I can't believe this, but at least now you said it wasn't a date, because I thought it was a date. I'm like, how do you? Okay, I get it. But also the guy was also a bit more established and we missed opportunities with our fellow classmates. Okay, I hear. So you wouldn't go on a similar trip with people who are your age, like men who are your age, because what are they going to do with 4 of you, right?
They typically don't have money.
With their little pocket money, what are they supposed to do with the 4 of you? So she says, but truly here is a bit extra on the other side. Any of you watching an African city can't... An African city. Is that a book? Love this topic. Okay, I'm not sure. I think we should have been reading these while they were happening, because I feel like this is the recommendation. So it's not beyond the beautiful forever, it's behind, right?
Behind the beautiful.
Yes. Pat says thanks, Alice and Vuvu. Thank you so much for joining us, Pat. She says she's in the UK and she has now ordered her copy. Yay! We love you here, Pat. Pat is a firm fave of the channel. Thank you so much for the support. And that brings us to the end. We are about 20 minutes over time. I'm sorry. But thank you so very much. We appreciated this a lot.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you to everyone, and those who purchased the copy, thank you. And my only thing I ask is, when you're done reading, please write a review. You can go on my Amazon page or Goodreads. I'll share those with you again, and you can post them. Reviews are so important for debut authors like myself. And like I said, I'm open to criticism. So just be kind when you tell me.
Yes.
So give me a 1 star. Just say it very nicely and gently, like, this is not my cup of tea. And I'll be fine. But yeah,
I hear you.
I'm looking forward to your reviews.
Thank you so much, Alice. Have a great day further. We are going to bed. You are still midday, afternooning there.
Almost 2:30. So yeah, the day's still going on. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, guys.